Hello there. We're at the Washington Park Media Center today for our season finale of the Paint It Forward series. And today we're kind of peeling the layers back a little bit and taking away the fourth wall. Being joined today by Wes Tank, who you can hear playing us in on his new drum.
Hello.
And Washington Park Media Center is kind of the topic of our discussion today. So, as a hub for media production, strategy, and training, there's so much more that goes on in terms of how it's run, but also the creativity that drives it. So that's what we'll be discussing today, as well as the individual practice of Wes here and his multiple modes of creativity. So, Wes, how are you doing today?
I'm pretty good. I'm doing pretty good. I'm a little nervous to be in front of the camera. Normally I'm behind the camera when we do this. So, but I know you'll make it nice and comfortable.
Well, I mean, these sweet tunes that you're making for us are getting me in the zone for sure.
It's calming me down a little bit.
Well, and I think for me, the contrast, between the technical and the production side of things, and then the musicality, the creativity that goes into it, has always been really intriguing and something that's drawn me to video and media work in the past. So I think we'll talk a little bit more about that. But before we get too much into it, we have to start off with the perennial question: how do you define you?
How do we define me? Indeed, that is the question. Well, I consider myself, myself, first of all. And second of all, I would say I'm an artist, I guess, if you have to put it into a box. I'm a media maker. I'm a filmmaker. I make music. I make visual art. I take pictures, and I kind of just create, a lot. And it's kind of my favorite thing to do is just to make stuff. And I getting a little echo here. For my work, I've been lucky enough to be able to be a videographer and make videos for a living, and make all different types of media for all different types of clients. And I also get to make stuff for my YouTube channel. And that's where we're sitting right now, is where I make most of my YouTube videos now, within here as well as in the park across the street. We're here at Washington Park Media Center, as you said. So this with my partner, Sara, we made this place together. And we made it as a place where we can make our own stuff, and also where we can invite other people in to make their stuff with us. So I guess you asked me to define myself. It's just so hard to define yourself. And as soon as I start to do it, I immediately want to edit what I'm saying. And, that's just kind of the constant flux of it, because you kind of don't want to pigeonhole yourself too much into one thing.
I think that last line too, you want to edit and you don't want to pigeonhole yourself, is kind of the essence of your practice. It seems like, the fact that, one, you're a videographer and a musician, so the urge to edit's probably always there. Pick out the best, try things out, rein it in when you need to. But also that, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself. You don't want to get stuck in any one box, right?
Right.
But I think that's what makes this collaboration between artists working in education. I'm Brett Hensig, by the way. I didn't introduce myself.
Hi, Brett.
Hi, I was. And the work that y'all do here at the Media Center, kind of a natural combination, because you're doing your own creativity, you're practicing your own creativity, but you're also nurturing that, providing the resources, the support, the space to do that for others and with others. Part of that essence of laying the path for others and providing those opportunities kind of comes down to your experiences, maybe, and kind of where you've been led through that. So you shared a handful of those interests and those practices that you've had. But the question I ask a lot of people too, as the youth educators that we are at AWE, is what did you want to be when you grew up? Because I'm pretty darn sure that would have looked and felt different than it is now, just by the sake of technology, right? Like Lil West didn't want to be a YouTuber because YouTube wasn't there, right?
Yeah. I think the first thing I ever wanted to be was an artist. My uncle John was an artist, and I looked up to him, and he drew really amazing drawings of like dragons and D&D type characters and so forth, and castles, and I was way into that. And so I was thinking artist right away, and then I think I evolved a little bit into wanting to be an actor when I got a little older. This is still like, we're talking like elementary school. I was like actor all the way. I was writing plays when I was in third grade, and trying to put them on at school. And like my teacher in fourth grade had a section. We had a thing called milk break in school, and it was like, did you have milk break? Y'all did?
Yeah. We still had tickets that you'd pay your school lunch money, and then
okay.
you'd get the little paper ticket before
Okay.
like the digital card swipe thing.
Yeah. I think they just would bring a crate full of milk cartons, and we'd all like have some. So I'd have a little performance time that my fourth grade teacher, Mrs. Horn, would set aside for Wes to just like go do something on stage. And so sometimes I performed. That's when I did my first rap show, really. My first time I rapped on stage was in
third grade milk break.
Yeah, fourth grade milk break. Yeah, that was like actually one of the names of a podcast or something type of show that I want to make. It was called Fourth Grade Milk Break.
It has a nice like rhythm
where I just do
word.
stuff.
Yeah, amen. But that too, though, that idea that your teacher like recognized that within you and provided you the space and opportunity feels a lot like what you're doing here for people too. So painting it forward, as we say around here.
Absolutely, that's the series. Yeah, I think that's. I really appreciated that she did that for me. And I mean, there were a couple of other kids that I would get to come up and do it too, but it was mostly just I was just the only one that wanted to get in front of the class for some reason. And I think that, but my life sort of took lots of twists and turns since then. And I got really into basketball in middle school, and like the art side of me kind of like got like pushed back a little bit. And then I was in cross country, so I couldn't do the play, and it was all kind of like my initial instincts were kind of like thwarted a little bit. And it wasn't until years later in high school that I started getting into film, and I kind of got the film bug. I was always like drawing along the way.
Sure.
I'd always just kind of draw, but it was just kind of my like little thing. I didn't know. But then when I got in high school, I saw some films, and I was starting to realize, oh, I really could do this. And I took a video productions class, and that was another teacher that really influenced me. Mr. Allison was basically, put a camera in my hands, put some editing software on the computers, and like let us just kind of go run wild, and put me on a project of doing the cross country video, and then the basketball video, and then I did the graduation video. It was like I kind of like took to it right away, and started to just get into editing. And then I realized, oh, that's like a major in college, and so I went to UW-Milwaukee for film to do that. I just kind of like knew at that point that that's what I wanted to do.
And do you feel like when you said thwarted to the athletic side of thing, right? Like, what are I say this having observed a lot of similarities between the way athletes practice and the way artists practice, right? One might think of it like rehearsal in some ways. I use that analogy a lot when talking to kids about like what they're doing 90% of the time versus what they're showing on the walls 10% of the time. Did you notice any of those overlaps between the theatrical world, the athletic world, and the artistic world? Were there some things that you cross-pollinated between those, other than documenting them?
Yeah. There's a lot, I would say, but the first thing that came to mind was like when you're playing basketball. So my dad was the coach of our team in a small town of Dodgeville, Wisconsin, and he really kind of like instilled like a hard work ethic and like kind of repetition to sort of learn something and like get good at it. And I became a really good like 3-point shooter. And that was always my thing. And so definitely the hard work aspect of it, like, just getting your repetitions in, getting your reps in of whatever you're doing, whether that's filming with the camera or rapping or, drawing or whatever. But then I noticed later in my basketball career, as it was kind of crossfading into film, it was kind of like the basketball court felt like a stage to me. And I started to feel like a certain amount of pressure where, like, not in a good way, like it was like where it was kind of like, ooh, I feel like the town is watching me, or like people are like judging me up on stage. And so I think that when you're on stage, you can have that feeling where you're being like, critiqued or something like that. And so I think that basketball kind of prepared me for that in a way, to where it was like, at first I didn't really like it, but then it was like, but then when you do well, then you get the good side of that. And you're like, wow, so just like, just shooting free throws, in a quiet gym, who's like, hoping you make the shot or hoping you miss the shot, just standing up to that pressure and doing that is very similar to like being on stage and doing a monologue, I think so.
So it's interesting. I just heard something on the radio talking about college athletes and the fact that they now are able to, like profit off of their likeness and, profit off of their craft at the college level. And one of the things they were saying is it's really turned a lot of them off to social media because there is such an influx of judgment, commentary, and they said from the sports betting world too, which is a whole other thing. But saying that to say, as somebody who works within, social media and video in this like interconnected world, right? What's your take on that in terms of what's healthy, what keeps things positive when it comes to social media, and maybe how you work with that, so maybe you're not in Dodgeville in the court in front of the town, but you've got kind of like a larger platform where I'm sure that feedback still is applicable or still plays into the way you think about what you do. How do you manage it now?
Wow, that's a deep question. That's that's like kind of what we're some of the aspects of what we're trying to tackle with the Washington Park Media Center here is this fact that we live right now in a media culture. Mm-hmm. And that's just means that like we're kind of surrounded by media all the time. And whether that's the phone in our pocket, or that's the screen on the wall, or that's a billboard telling us to call someone.
Personal injury lawyer, probably.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like all of that's media, our iPad, our iPods, our earbuds. I mean, like, and so we're sort of here. We sort of like planted ourselves here because we were like, okay, we're doing this, like we're making this stuff. Everyone around us is making this stuff and consuming it constantly. So why don't we make a place that's like all about understanding it and kind of talking about it and like coming out of like our silos about it. And as far as like what I've learned with that is, I mean, there's definitely a balance to be achieved, right? Like we shouldn't be on our phone all the time. Like we should let go of it sometimes and just like, put it in the other room and like just, zone out and like, play a little panda drum for a little while, and that's actually was part of the reason I got this is kind of like it's meant it, in one sense, it can like replace screen time a little bit, and it just gives you something to do with your hands and kind of like a just a calming tone. But going outside and like feeling the breeze, feeling the sunshine on your face. Don't bring the phone sometimes. I bring my phone because I like to keep track of my steps. uh, but and I like combining things as long as I'm like I'm aware of what I'm doing. I like to listen to a Brian Eno track while I'm walking through the park, or I like to like brush up on my Danny Brown before going to the concert. You know what I mean? Like kind of like just media is not inherently bad. It's just kind of like a matter of like how much we consume of it and how we understand what we're consuming. It's kind of like how does media affect our psychological and our physical reality? Does that answer your question at all, or is that just like
Most definitely
the ravings of a madman?
That's for the viewers to determine.
Okay. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We are on YouTube here.
Well, and that to me is something I reflect on a lot, is that, being that bridge generation between like life with digital technology in your pocket versus not, like there's a lot more opportunity to opt in, but there's also a lot more advantage taken of people's attention, right? And you mentioned that when it came to like billboards and the media and how pervasive it is. So do you ever find yourself in that moment, kind of like pre-Panda Drum purchase, where you need to like disconnect? What are those, maybe, I don't want to say warning signs because that seems kind of dire, but like what are some of those little red flags that pop up and say like it's time to take that nature walk, or it's time to disconnect for a moment or two, as somebody who, again, I don't want to aggrandize things and make you feel uncomfortable, but like so many young people want to be YouTubers when they grow up, right? Like it's ironic too, because, pro athlete is up there as well. And it's a matter of, putting it into context. So like if you are aspiring to do that sort of thing in be editing, be digital, be in front of a screen, as a professional who's done that, but also lived in a world where that wasn't the case, do you observe those things within yourself with some clarity, and how could you share that forward to people who are doing the same?
Yeah, I mean, I try to make some guardrails for myself just the way I would if I had a kid. Like I try to cut the screen off by like 11 p.m., time for phone to go to bed, and just be that. And then I can come down here and make music or something like that. I mean, I'm a little bit of a weird example because like I'm literally like doing media every day, and not just casually watching videos. Like I'm making videos every single day. I'm editing, or I'm filming, or I'm planning, or I'm reflecting on a Zoom call or something. You know what I mean? It's like I'm doing it all the time. So I really have to like be careful about it, and careful about how much I'm consuming, and try to make sure there's like a balance between what I'm creating and what I'm consuming, and when I'm like turning off, so it's like, you want to turn off the phone like, at least an hour before bed. You want to not turn on the phone right away. Don't like go right in your emails or something, or like Instagram first thing. It's like it's just never good. It's never it's never it's like you're either like gonna turn on their phone and find out you went viral or something, and be like terrified, and or you're gonna like you're gonna have an email from your boss and you're like, oh, I did not want to see that yet, like like I wasn't ready. You're never ready. So it's just being intentional, and maybe it's like deleting an app off your phone, like TikTok or Facebook or whichever one you're like always going to. Sure. When you're bored. Sometimes that's another thing I think about when I'm like in line or something. Like my instinct is just to go to my phone and look at it, and I'm kind of always like, sometimes I'll stop and I'll just be like, no, just put that back and just like notice, just turn on your your surround sound.
Sure. I just love how this entire conversation too, you're talking about like crossfading between things. You're using the language, and it just, I think, is testament to that, the artist's eye, right? Like they say, creative people, artists, they see the world differently. And I feel like just this discussion is kind of showing how you seem to be kind of like ever present with that language, with that kind of syntax that revolves around the craft. So the question I have too, when you're noticing, right, like, do you have an example you could share of one of those bored moments where something that you noticed, heard, observed, what have you, turned into a more meaningful or more intentional project?
I mean, my mind instantly went to like when I was picking up trash in Washington Park 5 years ago or so, which is something that I just kind of do sometimes, just for fun, or just to. This was in the pandemic, and it was kind of like there was no real like. There was nothing to do,
right.
Or there was plenty to do, but I remember walking around and just it was like early spring, and all the trash has emerged from winter time and stuff. And at that time, I wasn't really like as well connected into like who's doing all the cleanups. Like shout out Rooted and Rising, they always do the cleanups that we like to help out with when we can. And but at the time I was just kind of doing it by myself. And I remember that was where when I first got the idea to make my my Dr. Seuss video series that eventually went viral and kind of changed the course of my career a little bit. And I always find like when I go out picking up garbage is when I get my best ideas. Because it's like, I think it's because you're just doing something good. You're doing something with your hands that's just like, and you're looking at your environment, you're seeing it, you're taking it in, and then you're like, every piece of trash is like a story that's like part of somebody's day that they just like that and they casually threw it away or something, or it blew away. And so I don't know, I think there's like something like karmic or something where you're just like, you get you're giving something of your time to the world, and you get a little something back sometimes. It's like a good idea.
For sure. When I like that thought too, that you're kind of seeing storytelling in a lot of things, which is definitely a big part of media making, narrative, filmmaking. It kind of makes me wonder, like, I'm not going to look at trash the same way again. And it'll be really interesting depending on what it is.
Well, yeah, and shout out to the artist Paul Drucke, who does really cool art out of trash. Yeah, so he picks up trash and turns it into like art that you could put in a gallery. And it's like, it's really funny because it's like you're looking at it and it's like flaming hot Cheeto bags, but they're like somehow like sewn together and turned into something. So
when it excellent.
Is she ready to come in? Yeah. Oh, well, it sounds like it's a good time to
Should we play
segue?
her in?
Oh yeah, we'll play her in.
All right. We're going to be joined by Sara Daleiden, who's the other half of Washington Park Media Center, shortly. Hello, Sara.
Hello, that's beautiful music. Thanks for the intro, Wes. The rival music.
Well, and we've just been talking a little bit about media and the real world and the ways to connect and disconnect using both. So could you please, as I like to ask everybody, introduce yourself, but with the added question of tell us where you're joining us from through the power of digital media and video.
I'm Sara. I'm impressed. Brett said my last name accurately, which rarely happens. So my last name is Daleiden, but Sara is fine. And I exist in the world of MKE-LAX, which for me is the port codes for Milwaukee and Los Angeles. And I'm calling in right now from a place I live and work in downtown Los Angeles. We're having an atmospheric river the last few days, which just means we're having a lot of rain that comes and goes in different kind of intense chunks. So all of a sudden just came in. So, but I made it. Here I am.
We appreciate it. So, Sara, can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do here at the Media Center as MKE-LAX?
So I was born and raised in that region, some in small towns and some in the city. I'm very attached to Milwaukee, and as a place, but also I just love all the different ways nature shows up there, and have very extensive family friend networks there. So, but I decided to move to Los Angeles over 20 years ago, which is amazing. And that was a complex move for me as an artist who works with land a lot and experiences a place in my work. Sometimes I feel that I am living in a different country than you are there in Milwaukee. And sometimes it can feel like a different planet even. But somehow we are all in the US together, which is amazing to me. So I have done a lot with MK to LAX, which is a cultural exchange program that just has a lot of roots in working with media, because we are in a media culture here in U.S. lands. And that's part of what, after many years of doing, supporting a lot of Milwaukee artists and other kinds of culture workers to engage with Los Angeles and vice versa. And sometimes my Los Angeles networks is people from all over the world, because this is a global port. So as much as I work with people who are residents of Los Angeles, I work with people who are from all different kinds of countries when I'm here and other places in the US. So I just, I maybe kind of, because it's the story of my own life, I was asked questions about how to move back and forth and connect these two places in the US. Each that I have what I would call regional poetics, things that are important to that place to express what life is like there, and I think artists are particularly good at doing that. So, so the point is, Washington Park Media Center grew in a lot of ways from a long conversation with Wes about what it would mean to make context for our own professional media making in Milwaukee, but also in a way where we could engage some of the other professionals we work with and neighbors there on the near west side. We just really wanted, again, to have an open conversation around media literacy, as well as equipment and strategies for storytelling and all the things that go along with media making. So, but yeah, for me, it was also this was always the dream, was that I could be in Los Angeles or someone else could, but be present to a conversation that it's a very powerful tool, the live stream.
Thank you for that, Sara. Yeah, I always think it's interesting too, as a lifelong Milwaukeean Midwesterner, there seems to be this, I would say possibly valid in some ways, desire or thought that getting out of Milwaukee, right? Getting out of the small town, moving to the big city, and especially when it comes to media, there are definitely some regional advantages to being on the West Coast if you are a media maker. But in the work that you do in that idea of cultural exchange, what do you see as some of those things that draws people to the Midwest? I think that we often overlook some of the positive things, the strengths that happen, in our backyard in Washington Park across the street, right? So as a Milwaukeean and Los Angelino, is that my
Is it Angelino? Yes.
in Angelino? What are some of those things that you feel like draw people to a city like Milwaukee or to the Midwest?
That's a beautiful question, Brett. I mean, I like to think about how the Midwest was the West from Western colonial perspectives at one point, meaning that there was a point in time when a lot of, again, the initial settlements happened in the East Coast, that the Midwest, specifically Wisconsin and Minnesota and some of the other areas around us there, was seen as the frontier, right? And then there was like another moment, which to me, it's the art in St. Louis is always very expressive of this. That was like a moment when the sense of the West opened up, and there's a lot of land, both highly cultivated urban contexts, but also a lot of still open space that we can think of as wilderness between Milwaukee and Los Angeles, basically. So the point is, there's still a whole lot of country there. But again, there was a moment in this narrative around how the U.S. came to pass and all the complications of colonialism that was based in and pioneering. So I always like to think about how to connect these two places where there's still that root instinct between them. But I can say for myself that what I value about myself as a Midwesterner, even though I've been functioning as an Angelino for many years also, but even when I, sometimes I do have to talk up to some of my Los Angeles contacts to come to the Midwest. Because if you're really focused between West Coast and East Coast, sometimes Middle America just feels very large and amorphous. And so again, I just feel like it's been a process. I've learned a lot about it over the years, how to help people come and value. And what I find that they do value, that I still value, again, in myself and in others there, is I do think there's a beautiful relationship to nature, and sometimes that specifically takes the form of food, and that can be growing food, but also can be foraging or fishing or hunting, but really caring and having quality of the food and how it's grown, processed, made into dishes, composted, which really is like a cycle of life that's present and expressed, I think, a lot through the food culture, which I consider an art form in Milwaukee and in and around. Yeah, so anyway, that's just one example, but I just feel like there's a intimacy and a groundedness, even for all the challenges we can have in Milwaukee in terms of our economic and social and political experiences there. But there really is a beautiful connection to the landscape and to life cycles that I often find is valued there, but also when I bring people or I talk about Milwaukee here in Los Angeles, that's part of what I'm always kind of like calling forth in the way I tell my stories.
Yeah, one of the things I observed, I had recruited for a Milwaukee college, and it was always really interesting when you get to those places that ask, "Where's Milwaukee?" And I expect that, right? Like Milwaukee, it's not what it used to be in terms of you couldn't just drop Laverne and Shirley and people would know what you're talking about, right? But it also got to the point where you'd reference Chicago and say it's a little bit north of Chicago, and then having young people go, "Where's Chicago?" Like that was the third largest city in the United States was still kind of out of that context.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the work that you do as a creative, what's been kind of driving that? What do you consider your creativity in kind of like your personal practice, and how has that maybe changed or evolved over the years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for me, being an artist is also just as much of just being a culture worker, which for me means I can have many hats that I wear. I collaborate with a lot of other disciplines or corners of the U.S. market than just the arts, because I feel like at the core of what I'm doing all the time, in some ways for me, it feels very simple, which is I'm looking at how humans are relating with their lands, and also just how the sense of landscape, like when I walk across the street in Washington Park and I just enjoy the park as a neighbor, but that experience of like how, again, all this different life unfolds for me in that park because I'm moving through it. That's what I mean by, as an example, the landscape experience. That's for me a way of understanding life and time. It's not something you can see in just one view. You have to actually take time and experience it. And so I think whatever I'm building, I'm encouraging that way of understanding where we are, but I also specifically am working on how neighbors are connecting with each other in their neighborhoods. But for me, that's still because of how they connect with the land and steward the lands that they're in, which is about the earth, but it's also about all the life that comes with that, that's human and not human. So the point is from there, as an artist and a culture worker, I make all different kinds of things. I make things like rehabbing a bakery into a media center, like where you're sitting, and all the different kinds of media experiences we have there, including, events or apprenticeship programs. A lot of it's actually social activities that we're designing and implementing there. But for me, it's also a lot of times, I'll work with all different kinds of public spaces. So parks is just one example of that, but I also love working in the street. I've done all kinds of informal and formal art experiences in streets, on sidewalks or closing down a street, for example. So again, whether that's going to be a festival or it's going to be something more permanent, like we're working with you to affect those medians out front right now. And I offer this because sometimes I think a lot of the ways we concept art, and again, specifically in the US, in a Western framework, is it's still very much about form. Like you have to output to a specific kind of medium or again, a discipline. But for me, it's much more about the approach. Like I'm starting because I'm somewhere or someone has asked me to be somewhere. And I'm, as an artist, working to like respect the stories that are already there, but also see what new stories or hybrid stories can come to value that place and think about what it can be further.
Yeah, and I think that sense of space too always has been interesting because our earliest human forms of creativity and expression weren't so clearly defined between ritual or everyday practice or pragmatism. You're referencing food and food production and the idea that so many practices built up around that, whether it's to perpetuate the learning embodied in those processes through performance, through song, through action, right? So there's really a lot of artificial barriers put up between art and artists and what they consider their practice. So tying all those things to that sense of place, do you feel like where would a third locate? If there were to be a third cultural exchange node on the MKE LAX line, it's a triangle. Where would you picture that being and why?
I think it moves around on me all the time, but I have to say it's as much the in-between for me as it is either place. So again, that's a way that I'm expressing landscape to myself and to others. So literally I take an airplane a lot between the two places, but I often am like going somewhere else too. So like, again, I might take a bus to Chicago to fly to Los Angeles, or I don't know, last month I had taken a short flight to San Francisco because I met with other public art leaders like myself and enjoyed a lot of the Bay Area production. And then from there, flew to Milwaukee. So I think I had a one stop somewhere on that one. But the point is like, it's as much too about like, what are the other extension points from these two core regions? And again, I feel like for me, it's a way of still commenting on the US. Like we're technically the United States. I feel like we often don't feel united. And really we have all these other native nations inside of this nation. So again, nation is much more of a concept of a group of people, sometimes a very large group of people who are feeling, culturally connected to each other, which can include forming government. And so all this, I guess, to me is just the understanding that, again, land is never disconnected. It's a human perception that makes it disconnected. And even like our boundaries, like the boundary between Wisconsin and Illinois, that's a human construct. And so I like moving around and often take people with me, obviously, or I make media about that experience because it's my way of giving, again, a human opportunity to see why it's not as separated as we often think it is. And of course, the biases that follow when we think there's separation.
And Wes was sharing earlier that he had a profound moment. I'm saying it's profound. It seemed profound to me, but a moment of inspiration from picking up trash, kind of an unexpected source of inspiration and creativity. And I regret using that analogy now because I'm going to ask you if there's has there ever been a landscape, a place that you've found unexpected inspiration from? Not necessarily saying it was trash, but have you been a place that you didn't expect to inspire your practice or your work or your collaborative work, that turned out to be just a gem?
Was that a question for Wes too?
I think that's a perfect question for Sarah.
Oh, okay.
Actually, I mean, I could answer it too, but you go first.
You know, I have to say sometimes for me it's not like going to a particular, you know, city or town that does it. Sometimes it's even being somewhere I often am, but getting a new view on it. So again, I'm in downtown Los Angeles, which is actually a fairly small downtown relative to how big Los Angeles is. It feels like a small city. It's all these very distinct little neighborhoods inside of it. But it's a civic space for the whole, again, of Los Angeles. In a lot of ways, it's more of like a county or even a region in terms of what that name means, as opposed to just a city itself. But and I live on a street and I work on the street called Broadway. So again, it's just like a main street of the area. And I'm living and working over a historic theater. It's called the Orpheum Theater. You know, it's big, beautiful neon, murky. But it's more like there's these moments where I realize, you know, again, a street like my street that I walk down most days that I'm here, you know, all of a sudden I'll just like transform into something else. And sometimes that's because of, you know, Hollywood movies. Like one time I went out my front door and there was a big ice machine making snow, basically like making my Los Angeles street look like New York in the winter. You know, it could be something like that. Or another day, like I love once a year we have So You Think You Can Dance. That TV show is in the theater, so it's like tryouts, and like all the way around the block there'll be all these young people like practicing busting their moves and everything, you know. But again, the way it just animates the street, you know, I often just have my breath taken away, and I realize like this is part of why I do what I do, is to realize, and especially because in this neighborhood and other ones I work in, that there still can be violence on the street regularly, or again, some people feeling welcomed while others feeling really unwelcomed. You know, again, all those weird and unfortunate things that humans sometimes do with each other happens right out on the street. And so I'm always trying to think about like how to open up our imagination about what's possible on that street. So it happened there when we did 43rd and Leap together in June, and we did a fashion show again with our partners, Matt Black and some other very talented designers, but just like having a fashion show again, moving through the medians and the streets. That's the kind of stuff I love, and I like getting surprised by a place I think I know all of a sudden, even just for a night, feeling like it's another world.
I love that, and it really calls to mind the conversation we've been having around like mindfulness and being in a moment, being in a place, having your hands on something, and the level of separation that becomes manifest when you record, when it's behind a screen. And I think your example of like, you know, for instance, So You Think You Can Dance, right? That's on TV. You can watch it, but to see it, to feel it, even just you describing it, imagining the reverberation through the floors and like having it be a full immersive sensory experience really changes the nature of what it is. What are some of those things that you feel like Milwaukee could do in a different way to immerse itself? You know, like I doubt that we're going to have a film industry changing our streets into, you know,
Never know.
a palm tree laden boulevard anytime soon.
You never know.
You never know. Yeah, we're working on it. Right?
We have film tax incentives.
Actually, that would be good.
Again.
Say that again. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
I said we have film tax incentives at the state level or active as of this coming January. So who knows? Maybe. And Hollywood's actively leaving Los Angeles for over a year. Like the studios are going, you know, got too expensive here to make movies. So anyway, the point is there are these migration patterns. Sometimes I like to think about them as reverse pioneering patterns going on. Yeah. The U.S. grew to a certain point in the way that it has. And I just think we need to restructure. I'm not sure exactly what that needs to look like all the time, but I just feel like in that way, again, we're a young country that has had a lot of challenges and still trying to figure out something that is sustainable, right? But sorry, did you finish asking the question the way you wanted to, Brett?
A bit, but I think it's a good kind of point of convergence for the two of you to talk about too, is like, how do you bring some of that magic, and what does that look like in a city like Milwaukee? So if we're not shutting down a street for a film production, I know you referenced the Third Invalid experiences that we did with like having a fashion runway in the street. How do you envision a city like Milwaukee bringing some of that experience, like maybe pulling people from behind the screen and kind of like what we're doing today, pulling down the mysticism of and making it more real and more tangible, but also more achievable for people, right? What are some of those things what are some of those dreams that you have for a city like Milwaukee?
You want to go first, Wes?
Dreams for Milwaukee. I think I feel like Milwaukee has so many dreams. So many people. There's a lot of people that want to be artists here, that are artists here, and would like to be artists for a living. For their own benefit and for others' benefit. And so I think if I had a dream for Milwaukee, I would think to those people and I would think like, well, okay. First of all, safety. Okay. Let's safety first, right? My first dream for Milwaukee is that it would be very safe on the streets. And, we would have a lot more kindness and care. Driving school, I don't know, like there's a lot of like sort of pre-dreams, right? Like it's like there's a lot of stuff that we need before we can even be like a really great art city. I mean, I think we are a great art city. I think we're a great place to make art, and we're a great place to hole up in the winter and just make the weirdest stuff you can make, and have a great community and have a lot of people who are enthusiastic about your work. And you find these little nodes of artists all over the city here, and there's often you'll discover a new scene that you didn't even know existed, just by like randomly going to one show or something. You're like, wow, this is a whole thing. So I would say that like a dream for that aspect of it would be that those scenes could be distributed more to the wider world. Just like getting rid of that ceiling that Milwaukee seems to have. Like you can't really get big until you leave Milwaukee. I want people to be able to be big in Milwaukee.
I love that. And I've often said for years that, that Midwestern Milwaukee pragmatism is a lot of hard work, a lot of production, but you don't often get the flip or the partner to that production, which is the promotion.
Right.
How do you elevate it so that more people can see it versus, just doing the thing. It's doing the thing and then broadcasting the thing, which again, media is great at.
And that everybody has something to eat. Everyone's got food. Sarah, do you have one?
I really appreciate you saying that, Wes. I'm very concerned people have food right now.
Right. Yeah.
The hard times in our country. Okay. I want to acknowledge that part of why I have felt able to do my practice as someone who is an artist who works with land in Milwaukee, even if I just take the last decade, is I have found so many partners in neighbors and neighborhood groups and in the government itself, like the city of Milwaukee, over these years. I've seen a lot of creativity. I've seen a lot of dedication. So even like, I'm just in love with the Martin Drive Neighborhood Association. So it's a neighborhood, again, we're in there with Washington Park Media Center. Like the dedication to how they do the Halloween, nighttime trick or treat every year. It takes so many neighbors to do it. And it's so festive as like again, a classic kind of Western US trope that is Halloween. but the point is, it's just one example of, I'm amazed at how much is going on all the time where like neighbors are working with each other, and sometimes that involves neighbors that consider themselves artists or creative organizers, and sometimes they don't have that identity, but they're building things for their neighborhoods all the time. And again, that can be an event or a recurring event, that can be making Instagram photos of things they just think are interesting in the neighborhood, that can be having a community garden and making benches and other things for it. So to me, it's like there's all this vibrancy there that I'm sometimes either trying to amplify or connect and build from it. But again, if I had a wish, especially for artists and other kinds of creatives in Milwaukee, I think you've said it, you're really pointing to it, Brett, which is that I wish we could all just like take a really big, deep breath and release wherever there's feelings of pain and scarcity and competition, and just realize that, again, it's artists and creatives connecting to each other and giving each other props. It's exactly what you do when you host these podcasts in the beautiful way that you do, Brett. Like, that's where I feel like if we could focus on that together, especially again in this media culture moment we're living in, there's so much we can do to amplify internally in the city of Milwaukee, but also externally from it. And that can include a global eye on us. And again, all that can relate to building the economy, meaning literally building more income for artists. But I just think part of it too is it's like, I feel why sometimes there's such a heaviness. And again, sometimes competition that's not healthy, and it becomes where people are not supporting each other and sometimes even undermining each other there. That really bothers me when I feel like I'd rather there just be room, right, for all this different kinds of art making, all these different cultural perspectives, and to give each other shout outs, even if it's not, even if you're doing something I wouldn't make ever and I don't fully understand it, I can still recognize the best making, why it's important to you and the, again, neighbors or other people in the city that resonate.
Well, yeah, I think that idea of space too, again, whether it's that physical space or conceptual space, is, there's a lot of that like live and let live mentality that doesn't get embraced maybe as much as it should to cultivate growth, to cultivate creativity, and kind of lends itself towards scarcity. And that all comes back to education, right? How do you appreciate the things that you're doing? How do you appreciate the things that you have? And how do you appreciate the things that other people are trying to do too and bring it in? And for me, I'm speaking personally, but as somebody who's had a lot of experiences in the art world, especially locally, it's a bit of a misconception that art is exclusive. And in some ways it is. And I always like to call it art with the capital A versus art that we all make, whether it is, the music that we make, the gardens that we plant, right? Like, I truly believe that everything is a form or can be a form of creative expression with what I passion and perspective. So, making that space, appreciating one another, I think is hugely important. And I think it's also why we really wanted to, peel back those layers and put the cameras, flip the cameras a little bit, because part of this for us is inviting people in, saying that we're talking about art, we're talking about big ideas, we're talking about unique ideas, maybe ideas that are unfamiliar or uncomfortable. And it's really easy to distance yourself from that for whatever reasons. One person's taboo is another person's like jam, you know, whether it's the type of music you listen to, the type of art you appreciate, or the type of circles you walk in. But this locality, I think, you both were talking about it in Washington Park, or in the Washington Park neighborhood, is so diverse. There's so much going on. There are so many little neighborhoods, not just here, but around the city. And maybe the missing piece to that is a little more connection, a little more, bridges across those experiences and those rooms that we make. So yeah, thank you all for sharing. I know this is a little less formal than we have been with our discussions, but that's part of the creative process too, is figuring things out, working together, vibing, flowing, making that room with one another too. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah, I just want to say, Brett, that well, first I want to give you two, Wes and Brett, just props for staying dedicated with each other this year. It's been an absolutely beautiful series, and I've often watched remotely just because I happened to be in Los Angeles in the days that you were doing this. So just know you've had one remote global viewer. But I just wanted to say to your point, sometimes when I do MKX, I daydream about things from either culture and again, regional tendencies that I would like to mix. And if I could import to Milwaukee, I think I try in various ways, but if I could more thoroughly import equality in Los Angeles there, it relates with what you're saying, which is just that, Los Angeles, like if there's some very specific cultural experience, or again, a hybrid of two cultures even coming together that I would like to pursue, like there's so much room to do that. And part of that is the sheer number of people, but I would also just say, again, there's a value here around being curious about culture and allowing it to change and effervesce. Doesn't have to threaten tradition staying intact either. I wish we could bring some of that energy. And I often feel like the artists in Milwaukee are the ones to do it. As hard as the work is, that's the possibility of it, is to kind of say oh, let's acknowledge again, how do we tend to group and find meaning and understand ourselves, but how could we? And again, with a sense of openness to possibilities.
Yeah, that sums it up really nicely.
Yeah.
And speaking appreciation too, I want to give that shout out to AWE, Artist Working Education, and all of our artists and staff members who are also creatives and artists there who, really supported this new program idea and helped get it off the ground and do all the admin work behind it and help us spread the word about it. Also, Milwaukee Arts Board, who is supporting the programming that we're doing here. And again, that's their mission and vision, is to bring the arts, make it more prominent, connect people across it. So, those things are happening, and, we're doing the hard work here, and we appreciate everybody else's support too. So come on down to the events, go out there and be that cultural connector on your own, bring people together, bring people into different circles, into different neighborhoods, into different experiences. Check out our websites to see when we got programs going on. And for the Washington Park Media Center, we just really appreciate having that venue and that space and that collaboration and partnership, because I'm telling you, I don't know, I use technology for some stuff, but other things I have no clue what's going on in social media and videography, and streaming is pretty foreign to me. So thank you for tolerating my lack of knowledge, Wes, when we do setups and such.
It's been great. You guys have been awesome to have in the space, and we're really grateful that you wanted to bring this series here. And it's been awesome to, just the wide range of artists that you've brought through, and your, thoughtful questions that you have for everyone. It's just, it helps. It all helps the space kind of grow as more artists, and we've had all the different backdrops in here, and we've experimented with a lot of different backdrops and just setups for this. And we're how long are we in this? We've been on the media center since 2023. We've been open. And so we're still, we're still young, and we're still figuring out what this space can do and how to do it. So thank you for giving us kind of a place to practice podcasting.
Oh, sure. I guess that's what they call it. I just wanted to talk to people.
Yeah.
We've got a few moments left. So I would like to invite both you and Sarah to kind of take the stage. The question I like to ask too is what do you wish you would have been asked? But I think it's also an opportunity, as the creative media makers that you both are, to just use the airtime how you want. So what do you want to share? What do you want to do? I mean, let's have some fun.
I can go, and I'm going to leave it to you, performance artist, West Tank, content creator. Actually, I just would like to take a moment and acknowledge my relationship with Wes. It's a good example of, for me, again, of a big way that I work. I have collaborators often who become very close people in my life that I go along with, so I'll be in collaborations with someone for 10, 20 years, maybe longer. And so I think, again, I just always want to point out that Washington Park Media Center is the result of Wes and I hybridizing our creative instincts together. And it still takes both of us and our very specific skill sets, but I also think our energy and our our sense of momentum. Like we look for the intersection point with each other, and then it gets expressed in the space. It gets expressed in the people who come through and in the media we make. So I guess I just wanted to give a shout out to you, Wes, specifically, but also the beauty of collaborating as an artist. Again, sometimes with an artist that's very different for me, but being a long, slow conversation and trying a lot. We tried a lot of different stuff over the years before we got to this idea of having an actual building across from Washington Park. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. We've been walking in Washington Park for a lot longer, since we were living on 47th Street, and now moved over here and still walking in Washington Park most days. And it's really interesting to see how life sort of like works out, and you never know how you're gonna follow your path. You make decisions every day. What am I gonna do? Should I walk to the east? Should I walk to the west? And should I make a song? I just got this thing today. It's kind of fun.
Thank you, Wes. So if we don't have any questions on the interwebs for us, we would like to continue to invite you all to explore that spirit of creativity. And, just because you do video doesn't mean you can't do music, doesn't mean you can't do art or try it out. Just because you can't do any of that stuff doesn't mean you can't, make your own path, do your own thing. The internet wasn't a big deal when I was a kid, when Wes was a kid. Now we're using it to share with you all. So maybe you're going to invent the next internet. Who knows? That's the power of creativity and vision. So dream big. Come connect with us if you want to find ways to make those dreams a reality. We're over on 43rd and Valete, south of Washington Park. We do stuff in person. We got resources on our websites. We have classes, meetups, appreciations. We get down with a lot of different things in communities. So let's connect. Whether it's with us or the other amazing artists and organizations that we're doing. That's what this Paying It Forward thing's all about. And we appreciate your time, and we'll hopefully see and talk to y'all soon. And thank you again, Wes and Sarah, for joining us. This has been one I've been looking forward to, and did not disappoint.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Thank you, Brett. Thank you, AWE. Thank you to everyone who's watching. See you on the flip side.
Peace.